Is Terence Crawford's win over Earl Spence an overrated win, an underrated win, or is it rated just right? I interviewed Tank Davis on this topic. I asked him, Tank, you never really spoke about Terence Crawford and Earl Spence. You were pulling for Spence, I know, but you saw what happened. Were you shocked? And Tank had an interesting response. He told me, honestly, bro, I was shocked, but honestly, I also saw something was wrong with Earl Spence. So I feel like that's an interesting take coming from Tank himself. I feel like I felt that too. You know, if anybody was curious about my prediction for Spence and Crawford, I picked Spence, and I was wrong, obviously, and I was like shocked, I was surprised, impressed by Terence Crawford. That was probably the best performance I've ever seen him have, but I couldn't help but think, you know, Earl didn't look right. And with Tank, you know, Tank went on to tell me about how when Spence reacted to the first jab that Terence Crawford threw, he didn't react well. You know, he didn't even try to get out of the way. It was almost like he wasn't able to see out of one of his eyes, and that's a, you know, a fair claim because Tank has been in the ring. He understands, you know, how reactive, the reflexes of a fighter, how they should be in the fight. And he said that he saw Earl Spence and he didn't look like himself. So a lot of people, you know, base that Terence Crawford and Earl Spence fight and put that, you know, out there, and they run with it, right? They say, you know, Terence Crawford should be able to do this to Canelo Alvarez and this and that. But now that I think about it, you know, I thought about what Tank said. I look back at the fight. Yeah, Earl didn't really look like himself, and obviously a lot of that is credit to Terence Crawford for taking away the lead weapon, which was, you know, the talk of the lead up to the fight, which was Earl Spence's jab. You know, Earl has a good high guard. You know, he's very fundamental, and his jab is typically very strong, very powerful, stiff, but when he was throwing it, it just didn't have that same effect. And obviously Terence Crawford came out southpaw, and Bud always talks about how he didn't even know what he was going to do in that fight. He asked Shakur Stevenson in the dressing room, he asked him, how should I come out? How should I start the fight? Bud himself didn't even know what he was going to do. He wanted to fight, but Shakur told him to, you know, just chill out and box him. You know, he's a great boxer as well, so why not box Spence? So Terence Crawford decided to start that fight against Spence as a southpaw, knowing that Spence hadn't fought as many southpaws as he has, you know, an orthodox fighter. You know, Spence clearly knows how to break down a lot of orthodox fighters, and obviously Crawford came out there as a southpaw, used that jab. He kind of cuffed it, every single jab that Earl Spence threw, he caught it and threw his own, and his was more devastating than Earl's. That's what really shocked me in that fight. Obviously, you know, people talk about how Tank said, yeah, Earl didn't look right. You know, I didn't think Earl Spence looked right either, but Crawford went in there with that game plan. He said, oh, his jab is good, I think mine is better, let's find out. And sure enough, in that fight at least, you know, Spence versus Crawford, that wasn't really competitive at all. You know, even the battle of the jab, I think Crawford won that easy. And after seeing the first two rounds, you already know how the fight was going to go. But obviously, it's just an interesting topic to see. I understand that Crawford beat Spence, beat him badly, but was it the best version of Earl Spence is all I'm saying. You know, you can say that Sean Porter maybe fought the best version of Earl Spence Jr. Kell Brook maybe fought the best version of Earl Spence Jr. Maybe, you know, Danny Garcia, probably not. But you could definitely say that I don't think Crawford fought the best version of Spence. I'm not saying it was an incredible performance and that it didn't shock me, because it definitely shocked me. It shocked a lot of the boxing world. But honestly, that wasn't the Earl Spence Jr. that we wanted to see. And part of that is credit to Terence Crawford. But come on, you know, the guy's been through so much. He's been through 2 car accidents, the detached retina. He had a broken rib apparently going into that Bud Crawford fight. So it's like, of course, Terence still deserves credit for the terrific performance that he had, but also think about, you know, before you say he destroys Canelo, he's going to be able to beat Canelo so easily, and I think he has a chance against Canelo, but you can't put too much weight on that Spence fight because that wasn't the best version of Spence either, you know. So we'll see what happens between Bud and Canelo, but it's going to be a good fight. I'm just saying, you know, maybe a lot of us boxing fans are reading too much into the Crawford and Spence fight, and, you know, maybe Crawford, he's great, but is he great enough to beat a guy like Canelo despite the weight disparity? So we'll see what happens. Like this comment, Like this video, comment down below is what I meant to say. But thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll catch you guys on the next boxing video. Peace.